But that, I think, is the baseline hygiene that you need. And it is not necessarily a creative process. It is actually more, I think, one which needs rigor, and one which needs a lot of sort of, checking off all the boxes and a great deal of planning and how to make your money go the furthest and so on. Once that happens, I think, and in parallel that you think you have a winning creative idea, I think you retrofit to the circumstances that you're allowed. And if you're lucky, some magic happens. Regardless of the fact that we have moved many decades hence, fundamentally, it is a very disorganized segment. And the independent creator, not to be confused by a newbie. I'm not talking about just somebody who's out of film school, but I'm talking about creators who have a great deal of life experience, work experience. Sometimes they have amazing ideas and so on. Everybody's situation slightly differently. And very often, they don't have the toolkit that is required to go to market with the idea. It is untold stories from India, so far contemporary stories. And my tonality, and which I believe has great resonance, is they're very uplifting. They're stories of hope. They're important stories that matter to young people today. And they are stories, hopefully, that will have impact. If they get made, they will have impact beyond the film. They have impact to help the planet, to help causes, to help communities. What a lovely time to be a creator. The opportunities are endless. The possibilities are endless. Technology has made life incredible. So already, I think that the barrier to entry is much, much lower than it ever has been. And it's such an open world, and it's so much more borderless than ever.
Hi, welcome to the Mohua show. My name is Mohua Chinappa, and I am an author, entrepreneur, and ex-housewife. This podcast is about everything from business to technology to arts to lifestyle, but done and spoken ईमानदारी से.
Hi, in today's episode, we have with us Anita Horam, a seasoned professional in the media and entertainment business with over 25 years of experience. She has made significant contributions as a creator, consultant, and an entrepreneur. Anita served as the director of video for Condé Nast India, where she built a profitable video division from ground up. She's also known for her work as the showrunner and executive producer for The Big Day, a 6-part original documentary series on Netflix. Currently, Anita is the founder of the mighty Muse, a development and curation hub for non-fiction films. Her work is characterized by her unique ability to position and package contemporary India cool stories. We need to ask Anita to tell us a little bit more about what is the India cool stories into long-form video content. So please join me today in welcoming Anita Horam for our show. Welcome, Anita. So could you just start by telling us a little bit about, your journey in the media and the entertainment industry? When did it start? When did this whole bug start? How did you get into it?
Yeah, well, like all things, it was a happy accident. I don't think that there was any game plan. I actually think I've always had a bit of a enterprising spirit. So while I was still sort of in college, I used to try and do as much freelance work as I could. And, the odd writing that I could figure out and so on. And in the early 90s, it was also the time when some amount of broadcast television had started locally. So I managed to find myself as a sort of a catch-all intern, runner, production assistant type of person on a few such projects where basically you just ran around and, helped people. And in that process, I realized that I'd found my tribe. I just wanted to be there. I loved the chaos of it. I loved the energy of film shooting and the fact that, in some manic way it would happen and then suddenly there would be magic. And even though those were nascent days, I think I realized that that's what I wanted to pursue. So I did that in the beginning as part alongside while I was still studying in college. So I would do it in bits and bobs. And then I was lucky enough to find myself, ironically, as an intern at a shoot in Bombay, where, of course, I was not part of the budget, so I had to hang out of trains and live very far away from the shoot and so on. And I did all of those things, and again, in the midst of that chaos, I realized that I love the city, and if I want to make a career of it, I would have to move there. So I used up all my saved money, and I went back to Mumbai shortly thereafter. I went and met somebody at that time. Channel V used to be part of the Star TV network. And it was a different era. You could literally just walk in and, somebody would listen to you. And I got the gig. And they made me an offer, and I literally never looked back. And I've been sort of doing a version of writing, producing, directing for myself or for other people or for other companies or consulting or whatever in some shape and form ever since. So it's been a while.
Wow. So, Anita, you know what? Many of our listeners would really like to know, the entire creative process. Like, how do you approach a new project and what steps do you really take to ensure that, the end result just matches with the vision that you had at the start?
Yeah. I mean, this is something that I think a lot of people ask of films. And I feel like whether something like a project is successful or whether it is horrendously disappointing, both things happen. I think a lot of the clarity of the process is in hindsight. I don't think that, it's an exact science. That's the truth. I feel like there is a certain amount of creative process, less creative and more logistical, that needs to be followed for it to have the potential to be a successful project. So there's a lot of nuts and bolts work. There's a lot of logistical stuff. And the business of filmmaking needs to be quite thorough. And in your early years, you need to have the right infrastructure to do that. And in the later years, you might be having that infrastructure yourself. But that, I think, is the baseline hygiene that you need. And it is not necessarily a creative process. It is actually more, I think, one which needs rigor and one which needs a lot of sort of, checking off all the boxes and a great deal of planning and how to make your money go the furthest and so on. Once that happens, I think, and in parallel that you think you have a winning creative idea, I think you retrofit to the circumstances that you're allowed. And if you're lucky, some magic happens, and then you go from there. And the creative process is far too organic. As a writer and a creator yourself, you know this, you feel your way through it. It's really hard to, exactly know why something will work, but then sometimes it's working, So I think the process is quite intuitive, I would say. It's not one where you have to have a huge plan, but at the same time, you need to be quite organized for that organic plan to work. Yeah.
So, Anita, you worked with very, very renowned, organizations like Condé Nast India, Netflix. As the director of video for Condé Nast India, you were entrusted with building a profitable video division, from ground up. So I'm sure the challenges must have been really crazy. And, you must have probably faced a lot of situations. How did you overcome them? Because, for many of our listeners who are looking at starting something in this area of work, what is it that they can learn, from our conversation today?
Sure. So, the brilliant thing about being offered something from brand names of the kind of lead that Condé Nast or Netflix or those kind of brands, they're really the North Star when it comes to sort of the thought leadership in their categories, So it's an incredible sort of raw material to have. And it's actually a privilege to be able to already, because the doors are opening already. It's very often just the fact that you're associated with those names, the doors open. And Condé Nast in India, for instance, runs 4 of their flagship out of their, I think, 20-some stable. I think they run 4 of their flagship brands here, which nobody needs an introduction to. So whether that's a Vogue or GQ or Architectural Digest or Condé Nast Traveler, there is no question that, you even need to introduce yourself about that. So that, I think, is already a big win when there is an idea that, there is going to be an opportunity to build a business from the ground up. But that said, sometimes what happens that when you're working with a behemoth like that, the reverse also happens, because they are very, Condé Nast, for instance, was and is primarily known for its print stable. and it is known from a heritage branding positioning, it is still considered print first. Whereas actually it is a multimedia company. It has massive, massive multimedia presence all over the world. And the American arm has really led the way from feature films onward, and of course, podcasting and everything. But what happens is that you need to be able to work with fellow creators who are very strong in their own segments and explain how a new media format will engage with an older media format and an older heritage brand without losing the brand editorial, but at the same time having that sort of a language that is suited to video as opposed to print. And I think that would be the single biggest challenge for me at a creative level, to be able to make sure that at no time do you lose the essence of what these brands stand for and what they have created in their own right. But at the same time, how do you do those lateral projects that an Indian viewer, not primarily coming because it's a Vogue show, but because it's a piece of video entertainment on a streaming platform or a television channel, how do you sort of, make sure that you can be localized enough and, have the touch points that's required. And I think that was sort of the trickiest piece, but it was also the funnest because it makes you really, creative juices really need to flow and you need to figure it out. Other than that, I think it's my other challenge would be like any other thing. It was a bit of a startup format. So that's, in my case, I thrive in a startup format. So literally it's like picking your teams, then teaching them what you want, then setting the grammar for how your visual sort of landscape's going to look like, and all of that. So I mean, it's fun stuff ultimately.
Oh my God, it sounds a lot of fun. For somebody who's so passionate about it, it's very, very evident. You've written several articles too, Anita, for magazines like Architectural Digest, which is the international design authority featuring the works of the best architects and designers. So how did you develop this interest in this field, and how does it intersect with your work in media and entertainment? Because both are totally two different disciplines altogether.
Sure. So, if I were to, I mean, I think it's a couple of things. I tend to sometimes think of myself as a relatively format agnostic creator, in the sense that initially in the environment in which I first started as a very young creative person, print was a very, very valid medium. And I would argue that print still is. So in that sense, I love the written word. I still love the tactileness of what a written word can do. And I think sometimes there's absolutely, even today, no substitute whatsoever. So there is that element of that. And I have also, even when I'm writing, sometimes for film, for any of my film projects, I would still say write a script or whatever. Not all the time, but I would do that. So to a certain extent, it's an extension of that. But specifically with Architectural Digest, I think for me, again, and it isn't something I do all the time, but it is, a beautiful opportunity that has organically come my way, where, one of the key things that marks, I think, personally, my own personal portfolio of work is I'm very obsessed with the idea of matching style and substance, and I feel, especially in the visual medium, that the skin you give something, the art and the art design context in which something exists when you watch something, or no matter what you're watching in whichever language, it adds its own protagonist often to the experience you're having as a viewer. And I've always been very, very obsessed, and I have in fact spent many, many years doing as passion projects things like just pure packaging. I love graphics. I like the whole idea that you can make something look absolutely beautifully stylized without sort of losing the message of whatever it is that you're doing. So at this moment in time, if you pull back against all of that backdrop, India, and with the streaming environment that we have across all the big streamers, we are in the age of cinematic series. Everything looks like a piece of film, whether it's a 6-part, 20-part, whatever it is, from wherever in the world. So my thought was that I would try and use the prism of design and art and all of those kind of filters that are the cornerstones of Architecture Digest as a editorial magazine, and apply it to popular culture, which is something I'm very keen on, specific to film. And for those cinematic series where you're really seeing breakthrough work, to really be able to just celebrate it from the lens of not the actor, not the director necessarily, but really the entire look and feel and texture of the visual. And I think that's really why I write that. And I do it off and on ad hocly. I'm writing one right now, actually. But but every time something interesting catches my eye from India, I feel like it needs to be celebrated from this styling perspective and this art perspective. And that's what I'm trying to do.
How amazing. You've also served, Anita, as the showrunner and executive producer for The Big Day, which is a 6-part original documentary series for Netflix. Could you just share a little bit more about your experience working on this project? Because I'm sure so many, script writers, filmmakers all want to hit the big jackpot with Netflix, and they don't know how to approach this entire creative and the production aspect of a series that they put together. So maybe your experience is also going to help them, put their thoughts together on how to take it forward. Yeah.
I mean, the short version is that no matter how much experience you have, it's hell. It is one of the most difficult trial by fires that you can have when you're mounting a show for a massive platform where there's a lot of expectation. There are lots of, so even the more seasoned people, I think, have a lot of learnings, technical as well as, just in terms of what you need to do to get there. But to give you a sort of summarized version of how the Big Day worked out. So the Big Day, the idea was, and again, linked to, my mandate at Condé Nast, one of the things that I started for them was their foray in India into the long form space, because of course we did digital video, and we also did, our own editorial stuff. We also did branded content, but I also believed that the long form space was important and tappable. And one of our brands, Vogue, one of the big subsets of Vogue was the wedding market, because some of our biggest designers are big bridal couture, names. There were supplements that we would do in the print side. There were ground events that specifically catered to people in the H&I wedding space, as they explored beauty and jewelry and etc. So there was some amount of editorial expertise and definitely, I would say, access to a fairly rarefied world. And I think that is the first step when you are pitching a big show to a platform like Netflix or its equivalent. You need to be able to demonstrate that you have an advantage that no other creator has. And I think that would be the start point. Once you've had sort of that in and the buy-in from the platform that says, okay, this is true, these people can deliver this, then you get into the show design of it. In our case, what we wanted to do was celebrate the spectacle of it, the sheer grandness and the amazingness and the millions and millions of dollars that are spent year on year on all these amazing things, and the fact that it is so culturally unique to us. Much more than any other part of the world. It's almost become sort of a stereotype, the big fat Indian wedding, that sort of thing. So it started like that. And on that premise, we started filming in 2019. And as it turned out, we literally were wrapping the last bits of filming when the world went into lockdown. So that was a real kick in the teeth, as it was for many, many people. And I think in that context, it became one of the most challenging projects to date that I have ever done, because we had to relearn the rules of post-production and still do it to an international standard entirely remotely. We were working with teams sometimes we had never physically met in our lives, and everyone in their own circumstances. And we were working with footage which was documentary in nature, which means that you're not shooting to a fixed script. You're shooting to a general direction and you're trying to find your way, right? So it was quite crazy. There were certain days when you collectively and individually get up and say, like, what have I signed up for? Why am I doing it? Also, what needed to happen with the big day, and that is again something that happens, I think, with a lot of things that people don't understand, is what you see on screen usually has a production life cycle of at least 2 to 3 years. So this has been something the creator's been living with for a while. So during that time, if something happens, and in this case, the pandemic and the worldwide shutdown that happened, we needed to change our tonality. Because suddenly we knew that it was no longer appropriate to suddenly start talking about certain components of the element of the big fat wedding. And so we had to, on the fly, try and figure out how to keep it entertaining, but make it lighter, more feel good, that sort of thing. So it is till the day you deliver a project, I think the key thing for any creator, and I think people who are already part of the thing will know this, and for the newer ones who want to be part of this industry, I think it's a continuous work in progress because multiple things happen and you have to just roll with the punches and hope that you can sort of meet the moment, whatever has to happen. And at some point in time, you try and complete it within the context of, because where you started and where at the date at which it is going to finish is certainly not the same time line, and more so at the big day because we really were challenged by the double lockdown and so on. So yeah, but it was a incredible experience. But you really need to sort of decompress crazily after something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you know what, it is very dynamic and it keeps changing, right? So that's where the challenges are. And I think one really comes out much more stronger when one goes through these sort of absolutely compressed situations at your place of work. You learn that what you are probably capable of. So tell me the inspiration behind the mighty Muse and what is its mission, Anita? Tell me more about that.
Okay. So the mighty Muse, not to sort of sound like some sort of mission sort of crazy person, but I have worked all my life in factual entertainment, non-fiction entertainment in some shape or form. I've as an entrepreneur as well as a consultant to other companies as well, all of it, and of course I have created many shows on my own and all of those things. What I found in this entire journey is that regardless of the fact that we have moved many decades hence, fundamentally it is a very disorganized segment. And the independent creator, not to be confused by a newbie. I'm not talking about just somebody who's out of film school, but I'm talking about creators who have a great deal of life experience, work experience. Sometimes they have amazing ideas, and so on. Everybody's situation slightly differently. And very often they don't have the toolkit that is required to go to market with the idea. And there is no sort of nest, for want of another word, that into which you can incubate your little baby and say that, okay, like, is it safe enough where somebody will not, like some big giant media company is not going to eat up my idea or take it away from me or have it made in a way in which it doesn't suit my creative vision. But at the same time, can it see the light of day in a way that does it justice from an audience perspective or from a reach perspective or from a recognition or even the small things that it requires in terms of not so small actually, but funding, whether it's even seed funding. So this gap has been something that one has lived through anyway. And, some of us are perhaps a little more enterprising or luckier in terms of the breaks one has had or whatever. But there's a large group of people that I interact with who have always discussed this. So this has been sort of on my mind for a while that, okay, what do we do to solve this need gap? And what do I specifically bring to the table in that need gap? Because, and if I am to bring it down to 2 or 3 very simple and tangible things, I have a pretty decent network because I have worked now for many years and I have worked on many international things. So I have a network in India, but I also have a network ongoing. That's one. I also believe the timing is amazing because India, I think, is going through an incredible moment in its identity. And those two things uh, came to me that, okay, if this is the case, we have all the raw material, we have all the potential. We need a little sort of mentorship or an incubator, whatever word you want to call it. Can I do that? Can I build that platform up so that the creator gets their due? We all sort of get our creative, thing out of it. And perhaps if we're lucky, India gets that little bit of recognition, and my launch slate is all about in India in that sense, and my India Connect will always be, a core part. So I think that's the guiding principle of why I'm doing it. It is essentially built out like a global collective. And the idea is people who have big credentials and important careers that they have all had in different ways, individuals as well as companies from different parts of the world who are friendly and knowledgeable about factual content. We build out a kind of a collaborative village, if you like. And the intention is that, okay, we will curate some stuff that we believe has the legs and the bare bone ability to, go forward. And we'll take that and we'll package it up. We'll help develop it. We'll try and help sell it and take it to audiences, basically, ideally globally. So yeah, that's what we are attempting to do.
What are the projects that's ongoing right now for Mighty Muse?
So the thing is that, so just to sort of pull back a little bit. So the Mighty Muse, basically, I have been in a sort of a soft launch kind of a zone for the late last year, and I am actually getting into sort of a more formal sense of the business only sometime early this year. I've started that. We are headquartered out of London, and we of course have presence in India. So where it's at is I have on the documentary side, I have curated and signed up about 20-25 assorted genre projects that I believe have the punch that can allow them to sort of be recognized globally. And I am in the process of basically building out the stakeholders around those raw material that will then individually become individual projects. I am not a production company. I don't intend to get involved with the nuts and bolts of it. I'm looking at a slate. So my approach is more multi-pronged, multi-genre. But the common theme, and in some cases, like because of various, paperworks, etc., I can't necessarily get into some of the subject matters yet. But you will hear some buzzy announcements soon. But I feel like the common, if you would ask what it's about, it is untold stories from India, so far contemporary stories. And my tonality, and which I believe has great resonance, is they're very uplifting. They're stories of hope. They're important stories that matter to young people today. And they are stories, hopefully, that will have impact. If they get made, they will have impact beyond the film. They have impact to help the planet, to help causes, to help communities. So there is that element that I am curating against. And it's a diverse genres. I'm looking at people, places, true events, all sorts of things, but things that make you feel happy. I'm a very optimistic person. So I do feel that, sometimes you can do a very forceful story that makes you think hard, but eventually the takeaway should be that, yes, we can.
Of course you can, Anita, with that much of experience behind you and the work that you've done. Of course, I mean, I'm very sure that there would be many, many amazing projects that would come out of the Mighty Muse. So how do you kind of see this the current trend of fiction and non-fiction. How do you see this in the entertainment space evolving? I mean, nowadays there's a huge trend of all these, stories of real people that get done, and it's become a very popular genre. So, do you see this continuing for a while, this trend, or how?
See, fiction we've always had, thanks to our film industry and so on. And there have been a subcategory of within that of real life things that films are based on. So there is that, and those are getting made with more and more integrity, and so that's great. And I'm not necessarily the subject expert on in any which way other than as a consumer, because I love fiction. But in on the non-fiction side, I feel in fact the time for nonfiction and nonfiction makers and documentary makers, as well as makers of all kinds of entertainment formats that are based in the factual genre, I think the moment has come only now. And I think that, like, with some trailblazers, I mean, we won a documentary Oscar year before last with The Elephant Whisperers. We've been in the shortlist again this time. And that is just mainstream things that mainstream audiences know. But the kind of, films that are getting made and the bravery with which they're getting made and all of that, I think the opportunity hasn't even begun to be tapped. And again, if I circle it back to why I'm putting my eggs in the mighty Muse basket, so to speak, and saying, okay, late stage career, I'm launching a new enterprise, is really on truly on this belief that, we have potentially a completely endless supply of beautiful stories, because true stories are that. And then, if you simply can figure out a way to make them find their audience and actually take them to the correct market, they are language and geography agnostic, because a beautiful feel good story about a tribal kid playing some sport and winning for his country is meaningful to everybody, because it's an underdog story. It is not a story about the place or the tribal, everything becomes metaphoric. And that genre has hardly even been begun in India in a mainstream effort kind of a way. So you do have bits and bobs. You will have the odd division that of a bigger media entity that will look into one or two commissions, but at scale, definitely not. And on the other side, on the creator side, you don't have the know-how sometimes or the team creds to be able to be beyond your own passion and knowledge. How do you become credible to be able to make this film for a good? So I think we're just at the cusp of a very big impact.
Yes, I'm very excited because the kind of films that one gets to see, there are shots and there are amazing kind of films from Indian filmmakers. And it's amazing what we see in today's world, from the world that I come to in the past, when my father actually never allowed me to watch too many mainstream Hindi cinema, till I broke out and I started watching, films that had won awards, and it shaped my understanding of, Indian cinema. Hindi cinema per se, So, given India's unique cultural position in the world, right, how do you perceive this content opportunity for Indian narratives with global resonance? You said it is, it's agnostic to what the story is of the underdog, but how does one go about, because there are nuances, right? In India, there would be nuances. Like, for me to explain a lot of my own cultural nuances can get a little difficult when I put that together. How do you see yourself bridging this challenge?
So I think one of the things that is different today than, let's say, some of if we talk specifically about feature documentary as a genre or a subset of content, there was a time when India was seen with Western gaze. The people who made the films were Western, and even with the most well-meaning filmmakers, there was a certain lack of authenticity that you would you could see that, okay, the guy's not understood the cultural nuance, that this is a person in this context, and the subtext that happens when we look at a particular part of a story. There's so many subtexts, right? I mean, it could be of multiple kinds. So one of the things that has happened, and the shift that has happened, is that even with Western partners, including for the Mighty Muse, for instance, specifically, I can tell you that when I want to engage a European or a UK-based company, say, to be part of a co-production, at a practical level, if I give you an example, the I think the learning on both sides is that you cannot have a pure Western gaze. There are certain things that everybody brings to the table. In some cases, they may be technical in nature. In some cases, it may be, otherwise. But the all the films that currently I'm curating, they are being helmed by people. Most of the films, I would say, are helmed by people who are the local language-speaking citizen of that. They may be Bombay filmmakers, but they may be originally from Orissa or from wherever it is. So to that extent, that's one kind of cultural integrity we are very cognizant of. The other thing is that I think that the moment to break out of the bit slightly bechara and the it's a slightly rude phrase, but it's a quite an apt phrase. There's a subculture which is called poverty porn, where you're always showing this absolutely down and out sort of people and all that. India has that, but India has so much more. And even and so the lensing of all our films and the sharp focus of who the protagonists are and how they will tell the story. We are very, very particular about not losing the authenticity, and that includes narrating in the language. And one of my favorite sort of categories or adjectives, or I don't know if it's an adjective, but I always say that we look for the hyper local. It's not just even the local. So it is going absolutely granular to the story. But then you do need to mount it in such a way that it doesn't then turn into some sort of an indie production. And that is the trick and the sort of, balance that one is trying to walk. And with some of my own and some of my own networks experiences where, you do telling a very small story, ideally you want to package it up in such a way that the world will watch it, that cultural sort of balance we are very, very cognizant of, in fact, and it's a very big part of our day-to-day brainstorming narratives when we sit and look at material, that how will it translate. And at the core of it is it's still a human story, because human stories, and as a writer you well know this, that all of us have the same story, right? And all of us have the same emotion. So if it touches us in whatever shape and form, means the story has legs. Now the rest of it is, how do you put it out in such a way that the maximum people will understand it without dumbing it down, So I think that is in fact, the absolutely virgin opportunity that we have, because there's so few such happening right now.
That's a really tough, thread to walk on, tough rope to walk on. It just seems, because keeping the narrative close to the place that it comes from, and yet making it into an international appeal seems like a very enormous amount of work, Anita, to me. But
Noah, if you look at it, if you leave aside, say, a niche like nonfiction, and you look at what the streaming world has done to all of us viewers, I mean, I would wager that between you and me, we may have seen something that's Korean, something that's in a Spanish language, and you would choose the Spanish language as the primary language. You wouldn't even want it to be the dubbed version, simply because it's that riveting, and it is telling you that one thing, which is just like, you're like, what's going on? And I think great content, or of any kind, on film or any other thing, I mean, is that, you're just like mesmerized by, and some of the stories we've curated, like when I narrate it to, say, a European, like there's so many people who don't understand one type of India, but when you talk to them and they'll be like, what are you saying? This is happening. I mean, we have to showcase it. This is the way that we are sort of going to, we love to sort of show this India. And I'm obsessed with sort of showing, and always have been. And I think the opportunity more than ever now is to say that, it is, all the cliches about India are true, and most of the stories have not tapped any of it yet in that very authentic way. So yeah.
Amazing. What do you mean by India cool? I would love to hear that from you.
So, because I've worked a lot in fashion, lifestyle, luxury, pop culture, all of these things, a lot of times, you start thinking in terms of sort of, what is trend setting? What is that thing that captures the zeitgeist at that moment, and we are all consumers of it also in different ways. And I've always had this theory that so many times when India is showcased internationally as well, it's exotica. It's exotica. It's not necessarily the way it is raw and real and cool as it really is, which is also equally interesting. But it's just simply not. Usually, it's whitewashed enough and put into some. We get. I think the derivatives become some yoga and some elephant and a mountain and a sage. That kind of thing, and some roses and this kind of thing. So I think when I say India cool, I just mean like from a zeitgeist perspective and a pop cultural perspective, what is it that is the essence of that which makes India India, and how can we share that with the world in a way that it will grab the other guy's imagination and say, oh wow, that's cool, I love it, I want a piece of that. I think it's that. And that's what we're trying to package with the films. And of course, at some point in time, films and beyond, because today technology blurs the lines between everything. So, yeah.
Amazing, Anita. So, what's next now for Mighty Muse? What are the upcoming projects? Would you like to spill the beans?
Not sure about spilling the beans, maybe not able to fully, but what's next, honestly, is some days in the trenches where it's great. I've announced I feel like my motivation is, I feel convinced about my motivation, and I've not gone the traditional startup route. I've not been on a big treadmill that I have, this quarter I have to do that and this thing and that thing. I felt my way through the content. I've met a lot of makers and a lot of colleagues who have similar interests, and I've tried to understand what if all of us as a community are feeling as the lack and also the opportunity. And I've tried to see in that, distill that into a business format. I think immediately, on the creative side, I will be announcing a couple of projects soon. They are all in various stages of signing. And each project will be its own, as I mentioned, entity of its own, because as I said, I'm more like a connector incubator. I want to put the right people together and leverage my network for that. So I may not be hands-on involved with each and every one of those. But my immediate focus is on the business side, because filmmaking is very much about the business of films as well. And you really need to get things right when you're making international productions. There's a lot of infrastructure that filmmakers need on the legal, IP, funding, cross-border compliance, all of these things, which sound terrifically dull most of the time. But without that, it's not a complete project. And it won't see, that kind of rewards for the creator. So I am in the process actually of doing more of that kind of work at the moment. And later this year, hopefully a couple of things will be announced along those lines as well.
How amazing, Anita. Wishing you lots and lots of luck. And what would be those, few words of advice, golden words of advice from a trailblazer woman like you, who wants to follow your footsteps in the media and the entertainment industry? What would you tell them, Anita?
I feel like for anyone who's starting now, I feel they've already won. What a lovely time to be a creator, the opportunities are endless, the possibilities are endless. Technology has made life incredible. So already I think that the barrier to entry is much, much lower than it ever has been. And it's such an open world, and it's so much more borderless than ever. So already I think without any other thing, I think that if anyone has the interest, I would say go for it. I think if I were to say two specific things further, I would say the biggest learning I've ever had in my life is trust your gut. Gut feel is one of the biggest things that you need to cultivate, because you are in an inexact science. You are not you are not making, specific things. You have to go by feel. And very often you will come up with things that may be the way forward, or you've been offered something, or you are feeling that this is wrong, I'm being intimidated, whatever it is. You have to trust your gut feel, because in hindsight, you will always know that that was the right thing. And last of all, but very important personally for me, and not perhaps relevant to everybody, but certainly to women, build a tribe of women you can work with, women who at every level of the organization, whether you're the boss lady, whether you're starting, whether you're starting an enterprise, or whether it's a team and whether it's technicians, whatever it is, they'll have your back and they'll fully get it, and the work will be fantastic. And I've worked primarily with women all my life, even though it was not a stated ambition, it was just a natural one. And I cannot think of a day that my career would have been in this way had I not made those choices. So yeah, that would be me.
Thank you so much, Anita. It was an absolute honor to have you on our podcast today. And thank you for all the inspiration. And we wish the mighty Muse lots and lots of luck and success. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
To you, our dearest listeners, you can find us on your favorite streaming services, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, and of course on all other major streaming services. With loads of love, we are The Mohua Show, where we talk ईमानदारी से.